In this video, I'm going to go through the major behavior change models that I'll be using throughout this class. I'll give you a little bit of a high-level overview, but I won't get into too many details, and we're not going to talk about applications yet. The point is just to give you some background context so that when we hit those lessons, you'll be able to hit the road running. I'm going to start by introducing you to the interactive behavior change model. So this is a new version that is in press, but it's based on my original doctoral research from over a decade back. I took all the existing taxonomies of behavior change and merged them into a unifying framework. It's a bit more of a generic approach that you can use for almost any product, any intervention, any application. The way it works is we have a source of a message who's communicating to a target audience. And the target audience, if they give back some feedback, helps that source better adapt, better tailor. And it all takes place within a social and within a physical context. What I have in front of you here is the emotion behavior model. This is a model that I developed with the neuroscientist, Dr. Leo Restivo, in the neurobehavioral unit now at the University of Lausanne. And we designed this as a way of simplifying neuroscience for practitioners. And what it does is it looks at the human brain a lot more similar to how a neuroscientist would approach it. There's no anatomical divisions. These are more the concepts on which the brain is typically divided up functionally. And so the entire class is actually designed specifically around this model. So all of the modules, all the lessons are going to plug in exactly into this. And the reason is, as you will see, is that color psychology has relevance throughout the entire process, from first contact to final behavior. I'm going to walk you quickly through the model to explain it, and then we'll be going through in detail throughout the class. So we're going to start off with external signals. These will be the things that we design, your app, your user interface, your communications campaign. Humans perceive things through our eyes, through our ears, through our nose. We have up to maybe about 20 different senses. The neuroscientists are still fighting about what's a sense and what's not a sense, but they're somewhere around 20. It's not 5. It's not 6. It's a lot higher. Next, we have classification. So on sensory input, the brain automatically classifies information and uses a schema system to try and figure out what is what. So these are the broad categories, and we'll be doing a lot of color design on how we use color to instantly evoke instant comprehension through design targeting our schemas. Next, we have emotion. So emotion is instantly triggered unconsciously on the basis of what our brain perceives, and it makes the decisions on how to respond. There are a couple of major theories I will be covering later on, but for now, we'll be looking at how categories in our basic comprehension of the world trigger the emotions that then have a larger cascading impact on our biology, how we think, how we feel, and what we do. Next, we have habitual behavior. So a fair amount of our behavior is habitual, and that's often where we want to target for long-term impacts in people. Now, habitual behavior by its very nature is more unconscious than conscious. So forming a habit is hard, and removing a habit is also hard because you have to strain, and there's this like draining feeling when you're trying to build up and change a habit. So we'll look a lot at how we design for intuitive habitual behavior, and color is very, very helpful for achieving this. Consciousness. At some point, what we design should be going into the conscious mind, but we might want to design it so it's a little more unconscious or it's a more conscious. If you're working in an area with any level of risk, like giving financial recommendations to people or dealing with health information, you're going to want to make sure that people have paid attention. At other points, you won't want them to pay attention. So we'll look at how we design for the conscious mind. And finally, behavior. This is where we ultimately want to get at with most of what we're doing. So we'll be looking at this actually throughout. So next we have decision making. Decision making is considered a gradual process. Talk about like psychologists and neuroscientists and pop psychologists fighting about a subject. So there's a lot of different views on this, and I take a bit more of an eclectic view because that's what the messy science seems to suggest. There are a couple of extremely important feedback mechanisms in this system. So the first one is prioritizing. So humans prioritize information to a large degree based on their emotional systems, and our emotional experience with different objects and colors in particular will determine what we notice and what we don't notice. There are obviously some exceptions, and we'll also talk about those. And a lot of those, they exist to some degree in neuroscience and psychology and things like pre-attentive processing and Gestalt design principles. But I'll get a little bit more into that link between emotion and how it causes us to focus on one thing and not focus on another. The next feedback mechanism is appraising, specifically called cognitive appraisal. To understand cognitive appraisal, consider this. Someone at your work has just given you a dirty look based on something you said, and you're like, that person had no right to diss me like that, and you get angry. Your emotions fired up. Now, perhaps that person actually didn't mean to insult you. Right? They might have just responded like that for who knows why, right? There's so many reasons out there. And do you really want to be emotionally unstable, where all it takes is one dirty look to turn you into a rager? You probably don't want that. Most people don't want that. So appraisal, or cognitive appraisal, is the process by which we look at something that triggered an emotional state and we say, well, maybe that person didn't mean it, or even if they did, who cares? When it comes to appraisal, you might look at that in a different light, right? You might say, oh, when that person looks at me like that, I'll just assume I don't know what's up with them and they're having a bad day. And you won't really respond to that at first, but if you practice it a few times, you'll start to do it. So this is one of the key technical mechanisms that you can use to change how you respond and how your audiences respond emotionally to situations by changing the way they view situations, or in other words, by changing their schemas that they use to understand the world. The last feedback mechanism is reinforcing. And in this, we want to reinforce behavior. And you'll see that it goes from behavior that's deliberate to behavior that's habitual. Next, I'm going to introduce you to 3 models that we'll be using to understand color and emotion. The first is a model that we'll be using to understand the major motivational systems that drive mammalian behavior. And hey, guess what? We humans happen to be mammals, so this applies to us. We'll be using this as a lower level motivational model, and a lower level model that helps us understand the emotions that shape who we are as people and how we behave. Next, we'll look at the Cugelman Emotion Map, and this is the number 5 edition. So I have a couple of other variations, but this one is very good for teaching. There's something we call the higher dimensionality version, and that's one that I use in data science and artificial intelligence work. We won't be using that one here because it's complex and it's hard to use in teaching, but for data science, it's far more accurate. The other version is one that has a lot more detail to it and also includes maybe I should probably add this to the class, one on reproduction emotions, where we'll be dealing with sex and love. I should probably add that later on, but right now this is the version that does not have that area of emotions. So we'll be using this to understand the broad areas of emotions, but while also being able to drill into very specific emotions. Now, all of these tie in with the prior map, with the motivational model, but they also tie in with correlations to neurochemicals and hormones as well. Next, I'm going to be using a simplification of this because we don't always want to talk about very specific emotions all the time, because that can get a little bit confusing when you're trying to have a strategic design discussion. So I'll tend to break down these emotions into the broader constructs, and that's where we'll be dealing with optimistic emotions, where people are motivated to get something, or insecure emotions, where they're motivated to get away from a threat or a bad situation that they do not want to happen. Now, there's 2 areas where we will lock in behavior. So the ultimate goal for most of our work will be to get people in the secure quadrant, where they feel that they keep getting repeat rewards. So they're constantly rewarded emotionally. And there's also an area of extreme caution when we design, and that's around pessimistic emotions, where people lock into repeat punishments. And normally we don't want to put people in that quadrant. We generally want to help people escape that quadrant. And there are times where we'll have to make a detour. There are applications where that's required. It's also a very important quadrant for understanding crappy design, incompetent management who just subject their users and their customers to pure emotional torture. Those are the main models that we'll be going through. There's a couple of other smaller ones here or there, but most of the class is actually structured around the emotion behavior model. And everything I've showed you fits in within it, within a constellation of really intuitive and simple systems. The main point of showing you this now at a high level is just to get you to understand the types of frameworks that we'll be using, these very simple models that tie in with neuroscience and psychology, but break it down to a simple conceptual level that's a lot more useful for learning and practicing. If you found this video helpful, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. It really helps with my free teaching. If you're new here, this video is part of my Color Psychology series, which you'll find in my playlist. And hit subscribe for my latest updates on using psychology in digital products. See you in the next one.